so you've written a book called I, Citizen, and I feel like what you're trying to deal with is the hyper-tribal partisanship that seemingly is much worse today than it was even a few years ago. I think that's true. I spend so much time on Twitter, I don't know if I have a clean understanding of what's actually going on in the world, and I also live on Capitol Hill, so I really don't have a chance for understanding reality. But it does seem, and do you agree that this real angry tribalism is stronger today than it was even 20 years ago?
I'll say yes and no, which I know is kind of a wimpy answer. Yes, it's clear, for example, just you can look at the sort of these empirical studies of news coverage, and you see that coverage of polarization, of American polarization, left versus right, Republican, Democrat, has gone way up in the past 15 years. There's more stories about how we can't agree. And those stories, about 70% of them tend to feature a man in the street kind of style, which is never a randomly chosen man in the street. It's someone chosen in advance to advance your thesis. So we know there's more coverage of polarization. We know that there's less kind of cross-party, bipartisan voting in Congress, for example, that members of Congress are much more polarized, and there's much more rancor and distrust among those people that I would say are in the political class. However, most Americans are not in that political class, so they are not highly ideologically motivated or attentive. They don't have a firm commitment to a political party. Majority now identify as independent and jump back and forth between parties across time. So most people are just watching this and being told that that's America. When it's really not.
Yeah, and I think the latter is more true, and what kind of gives me hope for people is I almost feel they're rational enough not to really pay attention to the silliness that we do here in Washington, D.C. And sometimes it's frustrating to me because some things they need to be paying attention to, lest they be forced into a top-down paradigm that will not allow them to think for themselves. I was thinking about this, and you mentioned the Better Arguments project in your book. And I have a story to tell about hyper-partisanship. 5-6 years ago now, I was participating in a PBS debate hosted at the University of Virginia, and it was on polarization.
Oh, boy.
So they set up a debate on polarization, and they put me and George Will on one side.
Oh, yeah.
And a professor from the University of Seattle, whose name I don't remember, and a guy who's a friend of mine, Eric Liu, who started the Better Arguments Project much later. And much to the disappointment of the moderator, Eric, who is very progressive, and myself, who is not progressive at all, we started having a conversation instead of an argument.
Yeah.
And it was very frustrating, proving perhaps that polarization wasn't necessary. But I do think, and I've learned this from hanging out, by the way, this must be Joe Biden flying by right now. He's upset that we're having a civil conversation.
I saw a helicopter, presidential or whatever, vice presidential, fly over the bridge when I was coming over.
Yeah.
So maybe something's going on. They're going to solve a problem somewhere.
Yeah.
That's it.
But I've told this story 1,000 times, but hanging out with my new progressive friends taught me how little I understood about conversation and language, because they were using a totally different set, using the same words, but they were using them differently than I was, to the point where I didn't actually understand what they were saying. And so it took me some time to try to empathetically understand where they were coming from when they used language. And that's part of the reason that I think that we argue to no avail, is that we don't listen.